All right, welcome back. Joining me now is Chief Brian O'Hara, Minneapolis Police Chief. Thank you so much for coming. We check in about once a month with you to talk about what's going on in the city, and there's increasingly more and more to talk about. Really tough topics that we wanted to try to tackle today in this way that we could just really stretch things out and slow things down a little. We know that there's a lot of focus, obviously, on ICE operations in the metro. I'm curious what's been going through your mind as you've seen the things that we've seen, the clips online, just little snippets of these raids.
Yeah. Well, my biggest concern and what I worry about all the time is keeping the people of Minneapolis safe. And I think a lot of what we've seen, you know, it's been an issue around, you know, not necessarily what people are doing in terms of enforcing federal law. I think the issue has been more so how people are doing that. And I think it's been very destabilizing for a lot of people in the community. A significant portion of the city are immigrants. And that sort of instability is something that criminals and bad actors can take advantage of, and that's been the concern.
Yeah, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Has MPD had to respond to anything sort of ICE related in the last couple of weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to kind of talk us through anything that you think is important to highlight in that response?
Well, I think the difficulty of it is there's just so much misunderstanding about the role of local police and the role of federal law enforcement and what we can and can't do. And our number one priority is keeping the people of Minneapolis safe. We're the local police. We respond to shootings and robberies and domestic violence and all those types of things. That's not what federal law enforcement does. Federal law enforcement has their own job to do. But what's happened at times is these two things kind of overlap and they cross. And it puts us in the middle of a very emotionally charged political situation. And so we do our best to only respond when there are life safety issues, because that's our responsibility. And to the extent that we can, we try and de-escalate and ensure that everyone is safe, and then we disengage, because that's what our role is. In general, if people are protesting, they do that every day. Multiple times a day in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. We don't get involved. We don't get involved in First Amendment activity, people peaceably assembling, you know, people simply being present and recording law enforcement activity, exercising First Amendment rights. We don't get involved in those types of things. We do have an obligation to get involved when there's life safety issues.
People may not know, in the city of Minneapolis, many cities, there's a separation ordinance, and we know that City Council just amended theirs. It went from kind of like a shorter one-pager almost to, I understand, like 6 pages long. Was there anything added in there that would prohibit city employees, including cops, from crossing those lines into federal operations?
I mean, this is nothing new. It's been the policy of and the law in Minneapolis, as well as many other cities, for more than 20 years. In some cases, even decades longer than that. Los Angeles has had something similar since 1979. They've added some additional reporting requirements and mandates for disciplinary action and that sort of thing. But the essence that I think most people are concerned about, the separation between local law enforcement doing the role of the police and not reporting people to ICE, not inquiring about people's immigration status, not turning people over. That's been the law here for at least 23 years, and it's been the same in many other cases.
Okay, so if
they don't do our job and we don't do theirs.
Yeah.
Like, we have enough to do our job. So
if people see MPD at an active ICE scene, what I'm hearing from you is they can rest assured that you're there, you're there for specific reasons, and you're obeying the separation registration ordinance, and if you're not, there's some accountability there that'll happen if you aren't. So that's one piece of this. So then we have these active situations. We have protesters there, and we've seen protesters and we've seen agitators, and these are different groups of people, right? So what is the expectation then if you're there, let's say, and I know crowd control is such a broad term, but if you are there, what is the expectation, I'll start with, of the protesters slash agitators, as far as you're concerned as officers? What do you expect from them so that you're not having to use force?
Well, they would not be, threatening violence or, committing a crime and that sort of thing. If there's any type of life safety issue, if they're destroying property, those types of things, that's happening on the city street. And just because ICE is there does not mean that we are not the police on that city street. So it's obviously the same things that are our job any other time are still our job in that context. But over all of that, our mission, one of our central themes that in Minneapolis, especially the last 5 years, is we want to try and de-escalate volatile situations whenever we can. And that's not just Minneapolis. I mean, that's what anyone who's a police officer in this state does. And we try and come in the middle of not just these scenes, but any other scenes that are very tense, that are charged, that high emotions on either side, and we try to get in the middle as best we can and de-escalate things. Now, unfortunately, in this context, our officers are not afforded any deference whatsoever. As soon as we show up, it's been the case that people make assumptions that we are there, to assist federal law enforcement or to enable what they're doing, and that's just not the case. We are there for a specific reason to try and protect people's lives in our community. That's everybody that's on our city street, and to try and de-escalate situations. I mean, I am afraid that we could have a tragedy happen over this stuff, and then have a situation dramatically escalate. And this has caused a lot of instability in the city. And anytime you have this type of instability, it is an environment that is ripe for bad actors to come in and exploit and commit crimes. And that is exactly what I do not want to happen.
Do you see a world where, so we had Chief Axel Henry on last week, and I asked him about communication, and clearly they're in the same boat where they don't assist federal law enforcement in these operations. However, he is actively working on some sort of a communications strategy. His goal is to minimize the risk of people getting swept up, people getting hurt, bystanders, that kind of thing. Would you be open to a system of communication with the federal authorities that would help minimize this?
So we work with federal law enforcement in Minnesota every day around, illegal guns, gangs, people that are committing shootings, all those types of things. That's our job. We have relationships with all the different federal agencies, with the people who live in Minnesota. And those federal law enforcement officers from all of those agencies that live here are professional, and they care about our state. I have seen just in this short period of time that there has been a lot of, at best, misinformation. That when calls have come in and that when our people have tried to do a callback or try and verify, at best, it seems like people in charge don't seem to know what's actually happening on the street. And
people in charge federally, locally, or federal government?
Whoever is running this stuff, I don't even know. And it seems like, I know in my own experience as the police chief, a difficulty I've had to overcome is to get accurate information about what's happening on the street. What are officers actually doing? What's actually going on in the street? That is a challenge in any law enforcement agency. And I think just from the things that I'm hearing from our lieutenants, from our officers, it definitely seems like that is a challenge with what is happening here.
Okay. Can we talk about due process for a minute? Because obviously this is a big concern for a lot of people, and you talk about people showing up at these scenes and calling. You urge people to call 911 a couple of weeks ago. Explain to us what due process should look like in these types of situations. Help us understand.
Yeah. So just to make sure people are clear, talking about calling 911 is when someone is there that's armed or that's claiming that they're law enforcement, and someone isn't sure if they are or not. And that is a real concern. And it's not just because of what happened to Melissa Hortman, her family, and others in this state who were murdered by someone posing as the police. It's also because 2 or 3 months ago, the FBI put out a law enforcement bulletin saying that there were people committing violent crimes in cities around the country that were posing as ICE. And it urged ICE to better identify themselves during law enforcement operations. And so that's not just something I came up with, that's something the FBI has been recommending. And in addition, I know that we have had calls from people who aren't sure. In some cases, we've responded, and it turns out it was federal law enforcement. In other cases, it turns out it wasn't. It was someone with a gun. And so, we've had it happen both ways, and I've even had someone just this week tell me that they had a phone call over someone on the phone claiming to be ICE, saying we won't come if you'll send us money, like a scam. So obviously, again, when you create this much instability, this much fear, there are definitely criminals and bad actors that are looking to try and take advantage of the situation, and that's what I was trying to communicate.
I see. And the identity piece of it is interesting too, because we talked again with St. Paul Police Chief Henry about this, and when his officers were there, they'd thrown on jackets and maybe didn't have time to rip their name off and put it on the jacket, and there were questions around, well, why aren't we identifying who's who here? But the federal agents also, there are fears of doxing, and their jobs are very complicated too, because they are also under attack in many. As a law enforcement officer, how do you balance that with also you have a community to protect as well?
Yeah. I am certain there are good law enforcement officers, good cops that are involved in these operations. I am sure that there's good people in all of these agencies, absolutely. And I also know one of the local federal agents here from a different agency also had the same thing happen. They were photographed, and it was put on social media, and by the evening they were identified, and their family and so on. So it is a very difficult situation because the reality is those types of things are happening. But I just think that the larger issue is so much of the community, so much of the American public clearly views how things are happening, how things are being done as the problem. Again, not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it that's creating all this instability. And that's not good for public safety, for anyone. The political theater, and I think most people understand that there is a certain amount of political theater involved in any of these big issues. It's tough. Your position is not a political position. Obviously, you're appointed, but oftentimes you are standing up there next to a mayor who is very passionate about drawing lines around no ICE zones and saying, ICE, you are not welcome here. I'm curious, you stand there, so it looks like a united front, but are there nuances in how you feel about ICE being here? Is it kind of like a no-go zone, like you're not welcome here, or no? I mean,
of
course, there's nuance. I just said there are good people in all of these agencies, and just talking to people informally, I can tell you there's plenty of federal law enforcement that are a part of our community that live in this state. That agree with exactly what we're saying, that they think things should be done differently.
One of the things that Board Czar Tom Homan had talked about was, he said, hey, we want to go into the prisons and the jails, and we want to try to, deport people who are criminals already in jail, who are here illegally, and deport them from the jails. But he's saying that they don't get communication, they don't get cooperation from local authorities. If something like that was posed here, in Hennepin County, is that something that you personally could get behind?
It's something that I have no authority over whatsoever. There's no city lockup, there's no city jail in Minneapolis, or I don't think anywhere in Minnesota, but in the Twin Cities anyway. The jail is run by the county sheriffs and the state prisons under the Department of Corrections. So that has nothing to do with local police.
Yeah, but how would you feel about something like that? Would you support something like that if it happened?
That's up to the sheriffs, and that's up to the Commissioner of Corrections. That's not something we have a role in at all. Yeah.
Okay, what is this focus, this heavy focus on ICE operations doing to the rest of the things that need to get done in your department?
It's unfortunately, again, all of the instability is just a distraction. It's a drain on resources. All of the ancillary issues that are happening. Well, we already have a depleted police department that we are trying to rebuild, that we have made incredible progress, both trying to reduce crime, trying to rebuild, and in some cases build relationships with community that were never there, and trying to restaff the police department as quickly as possible. This is a stress on the individual officers. They are not looking to have to go to someone else's scene to then become the object of vitriol and hate, just trying to do their job. It's one additional thing that the cops have to deal with now that they wish they didn't. We have our own problems to deal with.
What are the resources like for that emotional support for them? I mean, we saw this post George Floyd, right? You've been down these roads before.
Yep.
What does it look like now for them?
It's substantially changed. There is a good investment in the officers' health and wellness. It's not enough. There needs to be more. There's a peer support team that's underway. I mean, we saw it in the aftermath of the Annunciation mass shooting. We have a staff member that's a psychologist, our health and wellness team, our peer support, all responded to the scene, and we were able to relieve, I think, all 73 initial responding officers in less than 3 or 4 hours from the scene, and able to debrief them and to put them on the track to get them some time off and to get them mental health services. And it's that type of thing that was unheard of years ago in policing. And I know more and more of our officers are seeing the health and wellness as being normalized in the profession. And that's a good thing, because a normal course of a career for a police officer, you're just seeing things repeatedly over and over again that are not normal. And it has an effect on you. And it needs to be dealt with in a healthy and productive way. We are human beings just trying to do a job.
We're going to take a quick break if you can stick around, and we'll come back. There are some other topics that we wanted to discuss with you as well. We know yesterday there were some metro high schools that were shut down because of some online threats, and so there are quite a few things other than kind of the focus on ICE. So stick with us. We'll be back after a really quick break, more with Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara. All right, Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara joining us here. We wanted to just circle back on some of the other topics that have been in the headlines, things that haven't gotten as much coverage because everything's been really ICE focused. But we know just yesterday we had some metro schools actually shut down for the day, and we had an incident where, and normally the media doesn't report on a lot of this stuff, as you know, because we don't want copycats, but this had a big impact. And in the day and age we live in, I think anytime you shut down schools because of threats posted online, it's a very scary thing for people. Egan police did end up arresting a 16-year-old who's going through the process of being charged right now. I wanted to circle back on this, though, because I think in reporting all of this, we spend a lot of time talking about the threats and that kind of thing, but we don't talk a lot about the back end and catching these people, the bad actors, and then also the consequences for this. And maybe, you know, by talking about some of that, we can educate people that this isn't fun and games, you know, nothing to play with.
Yeah. Well, we have certainly had an increase in these type of swatting type incidents, but also in incidents that we refer to and threats that are made that we refer to our behavioral threat assessment team, which is something that Minneapolis didn't even have when I initially got here a little over 3 years ago. And now, I mean, it's just month after month, it's exponentially increasing the amount of cases and investigations, threats.
The resources must be shifting.
You know, we only have 2 investigators that work on this team, and they work on that team in addition to doing their normal duties, and they're linked in and connected with other agencies, FBI, you know, mental health folks, and others that can help us assess the risk around a lot of these threats, because it's been overwhelming at times.
Also, yesterday in the headlines, we learned that the Attorney General Keith Ellison had settled a lawsuit with Kia and Hyundai because, as you well know, for quite a stretch there, you guys were very busy following up on these thefts of these vehicles and carjackings. So where, I guess, reset for us, where are we with, you know, we hear about the Kia Boys or some of these other groups that have been targeting cars and drivers?
Well, it's still not done, and it's resulted in at least 10,000 additional auto thefts than what normally would have been expected in accordance with the trend. And we had weeks where more than 2/3 or 75% at times of every car stolen in the city was either a Kia or a Hyundai. And just a couple of years ago when I first got here, it reminded me of the 90s, just the amount of stolen cars that were being driven around, joyrided recklessly, and then just all of the people who were hurt as a result of that, people who died, and all of the other violent crimes that were enabled because these cars were so easily stolen. And we briefly had this, you know, the manufacturer put out this software update that was supposed to fix the problem, then turns out it doesn't really. So finally there is a solution to bring these cars back to what had been standard, you know, 20 or 30 years ago. It's kind of crazy that it took this long. But you know, we need to reduce the opportunities for these cars to be stolen so easily, because there's so much. I mean, it's beyond the inconvenience to the owner and the expense to the owner. It's enabling, you know, all this other harm and crime in the community.
And so this is a positive move for the future, but for now these vehicles are still very much an issue.
I was with a city resident, with the Attorney General. His car has been stolen 9 times. I mean, if people are living on fixed incomes, they can't afford this happening once, let alone have it happen 9 times and then have their insurance rates go through the roof. It's been a lot of damage caused by manufacturers who made the conscious decision to make a little bit more money than to make their cars secure in the way that every other car that's sold in the country is.
Are we still seeing juveniles primarily as the main perpetrators here?
A lot still, but it's not as frequent as it was before.
When you and I have had conversations about juvenile crime in the city, you've often talked about the fact that, you know, it's not as sort of rampant, meaning as many people as you would think are involved. We're talking about smaller groups of people. Is that still the case?
Yes.
And is there progress being made there on those smaller groups?
There's progress that's been made. You know, we've made intentional efforts to have our investigators out engaging with families at night and on the weekends, trying to build relationships with other adults that are in some of these kids' lives, and to provide some referrals where we can to hopefully try and get things on a different path.
Okay. And just really
It's
quick,
still a challenge.
yeah, really quickly, our Paul Loom has been covering a lot of this, but there's a new facility, money for a new facility that will house juveniles, I think up to maybe 30 days. They're too young to go to jail, too
Right.
dangerous to go home,
Right.
and this is going to be hopefully, easing some of that pressure and a place for them to go. I wanted to quickly ask you too about budget, which doesn't sound all that interesting, but when I asked you about it a little earlier, you kind of just gave me this look like. So what's going on? The city just passed the budget for 26. What
Yes.
are your thoughts?
Well, I'm certainly glad that it passed, but there's going to be some significant challenges ahead over the course of the next year. So we're going to do everything that we can, but I think structurally there's some issues as we rebuild the department that just have not been adequately planned for financially in the budget. We've hired now 175 people this year alone to become police officers, but the overwhelming majority of them, we're paying their salaries and we're paying their tuition for them to go to school for a couple of years before they can go to the police academy and come out onto the street. So we're having a significant decrease in vacancy savings while still having the operational need for overtime. And overtime this year, we spent about $31 million with everything that happened in the city to try and just have minimum staffing and respond to mass shootings and ensure people are safe in the community, have public safety. Public safety costs money. Having police officers in the city costs money. And so there's a significant gap between what is budgeted for overtime, I think it's about $5.7 million, versus what the actual need in the community is, which this year was $31 million.
Before we let you go, I just part of what we do here, and the reason that we have you come in and talk to us, as we do with a lot of leaders within the city, is our hope is in the process that there's kind of a human aspect here, that no matter how people feel about a political affiliation or whatever, that there's a human aspect here. And I hope I don't put you on the spot a little bit, but I have to say, since you've been coming in, it's been almost a year now, you seem just kind of different. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you seem weighted in a way that I haven't really noticed, and I don't know you outside of these interviews at all. But can I just ask, how are you doing?
I've been better, that's for sure. I mean, I am very concerned with the instability that exists in the city right now. And I take the weight of my responsibility seriously. I take the obligation that I have to the men and women who do this job very seriously. I buried a recruit 2 weeks ago and buried a police officer that was murdered about a year and a half ago. And all of that weighs on you. At the same time, I feel incredibly blessed that I have the opportunity to be here in this moment. I think we're doing incredibly meaningful work rebuilding this department and making the city safer. But I just pray I get to be here long enough so I can start to enjoy it at some point.
You have family that doesn't necessarily live here with you all the time. You get to see them here and there. Do you have holiday plans where you'll get to be with your family?
Yes, my family will be here for Christmas.
Okay.
So I will be here.
Okay. Thank you for being here, and you and the other leaders who are willing to come in and take all kinds of questions from all kinds of angles. We appreciate your willingness to do that very much. So
thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. All Day Live continues.